Bryan Bishop, how are you, my man?
I'm doing well, sir. How about yourself?
Doing great. It's great to see you, as always.
Good to see you also.
First, I want to thank you for allowing me to squat in this facility. What an amazing facility it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, here in a little bit. But for those who don't know who Bryan Bishop is, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what your story is from the get-go, that way, once we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about here, they might get some context to why you do what you do on a daily basis.
You sure you want to bore everybody with that information?
I've never found you boring, my friend. You wouldn't be here.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate you having me here. I look forward to these conversations, these intentional conversations. That's kind of what my place is all about. So a little bit about me, just to kind of sum it up a little bit. Grew up here in Evansville. Went to high school here. Attended the University of Southern Indiana for a while. During that, decided to kind of go into the sales market of things. Did some oil and gas sales for a few years and traveled quite a bit around the country, and was able to learn a lot and make some good relationships there. And I was home at one point for the holidays and did a ride along with a buddy of mine that was a sheriff's deputy. One night he was like, "Hey, just come out and ride with me, and we can catch up and hang out." So got in the car with him one night, and the first time he hit his lights and sirens and we ran across town, I thought, "Oh, this is me. This is where I need to be." So from that moment on, it changed my life, my direction, what I wanted to do. And I felt like prior to that, I didn't really know my purpose. And I thought, the feeling that I got that night, running lights and sirens across town to help somebody else. Obviously, at that point, there was nothing I could do. But just being in that moment and that feeling of, being needed and the ability to help somebody, like I said, it kind of changed my path and my direction. So I was able to link up with him again a few months later and said, "Hey, I think I'm interested in a career with the sheriff's office. What should I do?" And he said, the best thing to do is apply to our jail and be a jailer and kind of learn what that process looks like and, how the sheriff's office operates. So I did that, and a short time after, I was fortunate enough to get hired as a jailer. During that short stint, I learned a lot of real life situations in that jail that made me grow up pretty quickly, dealing with all different types of people, and learning not everybody in jail's bad, not everybody's good. So just learning to read people, I guess was able to see that I had discernment, kind of just made me really kind of look outside the world I lived in. So it was a very big learning curve for me. So at that point, I definitely knew that I wanted to continue my career in law enforcement and apply to be a deputy sheriff, and was fortunate enough to get hired for that, and began my career in law enforcement. Here I am, 20 years later, retired, and look back and had an absolutely amazing career. I was fortunate enough to be involved in some specialty units. I was a canine handler, handled 2 dogs during that course of my career. The last part of my career, probably the last 12 years or so, I was assigned to the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force. And our daily objective was to hunt down violent criminals. That was our whole goal for the day is, if there's a violent crime that was committed or somebody was on the run, we were the hide-and-seek champions, per se. That's kind of what we called ourselves. So, when I did that position, I felt like I was really making an impact because, when you get a violent criminal off the street that hurt somebody, there is a sense of pride with that at the end of the day when you spend 30 hours straight out hunting somebody that just murdered somebody for a senseless reason, and then you're able to put handcuffs on them. There's just a sense of pride that goes with that. Really enjoyed my career. I look back at all the times I had and the guys that I worked with, and it's a camaraderie that I can't explain. I think you only know if you know. But, during that career, it also changed me, good and bad. So a lot comes with that. But in a nutshell, that's kind of a little bit about me and my past and what brought me here to the country club.
That's really interesting. So you say the career changed you. So can you talk a little bit more about how it changed you, and what do you mean by that?
Well, obviously in first responder, military, all that lifestyle, you see things you can never unsee, things that I believe the human mind is not built to see. But the only way you learn to deal with that is essentially become numb. You have to, or you won't make it through the day. So over time, the more and more you see those things, and they compound on each other, and it just gets heavier and heavier. I think the more numb you have to become to deal with those things. And unfortunately, it's not something you just cut off when you're at work. It becomes part of your overall life. So, I would see moments where I would take work home a lot, and kind of hard for me to focus on what was in front of me because I was dealing with things subconsciously that happened, could have happened a year ago. That stuff just never goes away. So unfortunately, my family started to feel some of that, to start to see some of that darkness, that sense of, I really don't care. I'm emotionless. I mean, whatever, it's kind of the attitude, and you can't hurt me type attitude. I'll just go numb. I'll put walls up. That was unfortunately what I began to do with my family, and they did something I didn't agree with. My response was different, because in that life, I believe that you don't really respond, you react. And there's a big difference between those two when you really look at them and break them down. But in that life, you have to react, or you may not go home. So it becomes part of your everyday, way to function, really.
I know many, there are many careers that have a difficult time with an on and off switch. I'm married to a defense attorney who's been a prosecutor, and I can tell you, we've been married over 20 years, and it's challenging because she'll bring home certain things that happen to her in a day, or she doesn't do it anymore, but when she worked in family law and she had to deal with divorces or child custody issues, or she was in the middle of things, and she's a caring, emotional person, even though she wouldn't admit that to you, to your face, but she really cared about the things that were going on, and they were personal to her. And it's hard to flip that switch off ever, and even if you do, it feels like you're kind of pretending. And I don't know if there's a really an answer to that. And I first of all just commend you for your journey and everything that you've done for our community to keep it safe. And one of the things for me, the reason why I wanted to sit down with you is we've talked about in private conversations before the struggles with PTSD and the things that come with careers like the ones you've lived, and first responders and military, anybody that's seen things, I think how you said it, seen things you shouldn't see, or most people wouldn't want to see. And I often have felt in my life there's a lot of people that get dismissed or kind of looked over, or veterans are a big one, a big topic that a lot of people talk about every year, and especially every election cycle. And as we're sending money out to foreign countries to do things that we have no idea what that even means, rebuilding other countries, it seems like we often forget about the people that have sacrificed everything, all the way down to the people that, I think about it, Bryan, and it crosses over even to our kids. And I've been doing some research because I knew we were going to sit down, but from a PTSD perspective, I know that's can be a broad. It's been getting more broad all the time. And what are our kids dealing with the pandemic, and how schools were shut down, the world was shut down, and everybody was afraid, and you couldn't see grandma, grandpa. I mean, all these different things that pile up on us, and I just feel mental health as a whole is horribly understudied and underfocused in our society. And it's something that through these conversations with you and hopefully some other people, based on the conversation that we're going to have today, we'll talk about a little bit more about what I think we can do a little better. But anyway, so how would you say you define success in your law enforcement career? I mean, so if you look to your mentors and the people that meant the most to you throughout your career and the things that you've done that you do have some pride about, what does that look like?
So if you don't mind, just real quick, I'd like to circle back to the whole on and off switch, because over the last few months, I was able to kind of have a new approach with that made sense to me. So in military or first responder, that world, training is a big part of what we do to prepare us for whatever obstacle that we may face every day. So when it was put to me, I went to a place that eventually we'll speak about that referred to it as training and not therapy, which resonated differently with me. And during that training, we were talking about turning the switch on and off. And is that practical? Can you really do that after so many years of being in those positions and seeing the things? And, I look at it now and I'm not sure that you can really turn it on and off. I think it's something that stays there. But what was brought to my attention is we can put a dimmer switch on it, right? It doesn't go away, but in moments I know if I need to turn it down or turn it back up, because that switch will never go away in me. That's who I am. I believe God put certain people on this earth for certain reasons, and he put me on this earth to be a protector, to be a warrior, and I never want that switch to go away. I mean, I'm a sheepdog. That's who I am. So I don't really want it to go away, but I have learned that is a dimmer switch, and I tend to. It makes more sense to me when I'm in a situation where I can see myself getting frustrated or whatever, to kind of step back and be like, okay, dude, turn it down a little bit, right? There's not just an on and off. It doesn't just go on and off like a light switch, because like I said, it's a part of me. It's who I am. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that. I think that's important for people to kind of look at that from a different perspective, because when that was given to me, it was like the switch came on, right? It was like, aha, that makes sense to me. That's who we are.
Yeah, thank you for making that clarification. I don't know the exact quote, but one of the people that I've listened to quite a few podcasts is Jordan Peterson, and he talks about it. He's a psychoanalyst and really well documented, and is considered a fairly intelligent guy to many people. But he said it something to the effect of, our society seems to be wanting to train people who are softer and kinder. And that's absolutely the wrong way to look at it. We need people who are capable of being violent and who can stand up and defend, but don't unless it's called upon. And that's not the quote. His is much more eloquent, but in a sense, we need warriors. We don't need sheep. And I don't mean that in any kind of political or derogatory way. But the last thing I want my child to be is dependent upon someone else to come in and save them. And I'm very grateful to law enforcement. I have a lot of law enforcement friends, but I've always taught my kids, it's like, you have to be ready to defend yourself at any given moment, because no matter how fast Bryan Bishop or his friends can get to you, there'll be times, and too much time in a lot of instances, where you need to be taking care of yourself. And so I think we don't, again, let's not get into the political stuff, but we need to be preparing ourselves and preparing our kids and our families for worst case scenarios. And we can hope for the best, and we can pray for the best. We can do all the things like that. But that distinction between there not being a really on and off switch and instead training, I think is definitely more in line with how we should approach things, because there is no on and off switch. And so, a lot of people talk about the different triggers that happen and how you might respond to those. So the dimmer is a good is a good thing. It's like, okay, I see this is coming, and you feel your blood pressure rise, or you're just getting ready to say that thing. So what's that? What's the thing? How do you actuate a dimmer switch? Like let's say I do something right now, and you feel threatened by it, or you think something might happen. How would you respond differently now with a dimmer switch as opposed to how the old Bryan might react?
So the old Bryan would react and still would react the same way in certain situations. I kind of take a second to step back and think about my response before I actually respond. So again, I am responding instead of reacting. In my old life, sometimes there wasn't time to respond. You just had to react. And that carried over into my personal life, my business life. But since getting more training, I understand that not everything needs immediate response like my old world. So taking that extra second to call it diarrhea of the mouth, right? Not just spit out what wants to come out, but really thinking about, okay, am I reacting off emotion right now? Because typically, when people react off emotion, they do dumb stuff. In the world we come from, we tactically, if you get into your emotions and you start making decisions, it's probably not going to be the right thing. So just taking a moment to really think about it and look at it from 30,000 feet. What does this really look like? And that's what I've tried to bring into my life since more of this trading is take a second, look at it from 30,000 feet, and respond instead of react. I think that's the key is really what does this look like 10 seconds down the road if I just react regarding to responding?
Well, for me, I'm an avid reader, and every time you say something like that, I kind of, some things flash in my head like, oh, I've heard this in a different context. I think Viktor Frankl, if you've ever read Man's Search for Meaning, basically alludes to the fact that the space between stimulus and response is a choice that you make. And those choices that you make between the stimulus and the response affects everything else in your life, whether you know it or not. And so being able to, for him being in a concentration camp and seeing death and everything going on around him and being able to get through every day was, I don't know if you can fathom that. I certainly can't fathom that. I mean, that goes well beyond, but getting methodical with it and really treating it like a training or a game, or when you can't control anything at all, the one thing you can control is the next thought that comes into your head, or you can't control the thought, but you can let it do the thing that it's going to do, or you can redirect it. You can train that thought to do something a little different. And I really love that you got on this path. I don't know if this is a good time. Do you want to talk a little bit more about kind of you got to a point where you knew you weren't handling things around you, and I don't know if we can put a timeline on this. Maybe you do, but I mean, we're in 2023. You decided to start not one business but multiple businesses, and in the window of a pandemic, and when everything was shuddering around us, and fear and anxiety and everyone, it was palpable, and I don't think we've really fully gotten rid of that today. And so I don't know how you want to maybe expand on some of the things that you've had to deal with more recently, and then what finally what made you make the decision to take the step that you took, and we can talk a little bit about your path now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a story that I'm ashamed of. As I was going through that process, I was embarrassed. I thought I was weak, but now, getting more guidance, more training, I understand. One of the, I'll just say this, and I'll kind of back up where it all started, but one of the, pieces that they use in this training, and they really drive in your head, it's not what's wrong with me, it's what's happened to me. So, a lot of times people in those positions are like, what's wrong with me? I can't, and it's not what's wrong with you. It's the things that's happened to you that have caused those responses that you give. So that really stuck with me. And it's funny you say down my path. The name of the program I went to was called Path.
I promise I didn't cheat on that one.
Yeah, that is facts, my man. So just to kind of back up how I even got there. So in 2022, in November, I was getting close to the country club being opened. During the process of building out the facility, I saw the amount of stress, the amount of work that was going to come with this facility. You know, it's a multifaceted facility. There's a lot of moving parts here every single day. And I knew that doing my law enforcement job was not practical in trying to run this facility the way that I dreamed it of being. I couldn't put my whole heart and soul into it. So, you know, at that time, I thought maybe the best option for myself and for my family for the future was to retire. You know, as I mentioned, I looked, I had an amazing career. I could sit around a bonfire with some guys and tell some amazing stories and laugh and, you know, also with some sad stories. But I looked back and I thought, you know, really, what more in my career would I want? And I couldn't really say there was anything else. I had a great career and I thought, you know, it's time. It's time for the next chapter, and I've got all this to look forward to at the country club, and I want to be so busy I won't even think about, you know, my past life, and let's go. So literally the last day that I worked, 2 hours prior to calling out of service for the final time, we were booting doors. So every single day it was like 150 miles an hour. Boom, boom, boom. You know, we're running a gun and chasing bandits. You know, hide and seek. It was the thrill of hunting evil. And then the day I call out of service, you know, I was like, oh, cool, you know, it's time. And then the next day I woke up and I realized that I didn't have that life anymore. And kind of had a lump in my throat. I'm like, hey, I'm good. I've got all this to focus on at the country club, and I'm just going to dive into that and give it my all, 100% every single day. So I began to do that. And during that process, you know, every day at this place, I was getting punched in the face, right? I mean, things are not easy. Opening a business in general, but especially a multifaceted and trying to understand it's a different life than I was used to. Different people, different opinions. It was just different.
And you can't respond to them punching you in the face in the way you used to respond to people trying to punch you in the face.
Well, we talked about, you know, certain people respond with violence, with more violence. This is a different world. You can't do that in a restaurant, right? Or a bourbon bar. So it was different for me, and it was a learning curve. So as things become more stressful, and I wasn't doing the old me where we were running and gunning every day, and I wasn't feeding the monster anymore. So when I was working, a lot of stuff didn't really come up. You know, I didn't really struggle with feelings on things that I've seen or any of that stuff because I think we were just feeding the monster every day, and it was fine. So a couple months into opening my facility, you know, the stress kicks in, and then I start, hey, where all my guys at? Where are the guys I worked with? You know, I don't really hear from them anymore, and you know, I'm still got a group text on my phone, and you know, we all would speak every day, and that's no longer going off, and realizing that now I'm not in that anymore, and they have another group text, and I'm not part of it. And you know, every day we would talk to each other. We were family, and we depended on each other to go home. I mean, every day of our lives, and that was gone. You know, and then I start realizing, you know, those relationships maybe weren't what I thought. What does this look like? Then I started getting my own head. You know, I had some abandonment issues as a child from parents, and then I started associating that with, you know, these dudes were my dudes, ride or die dudes, and now they've abandoned me. So then I started getting angry, you know, and be honest, I was at a point where I didn't even like the police anymore. I was that angry, that bitter, not knowing it was internal. It wasn't them. You know, their life goes on. You know, they're still booting doors. You know, and as I look back, I wasn't calling them either, right? I was just expecting my phone to call. Hey, Bryan, how are you doing? Man, it doesn't work that way, right? Relationship's two-sided. But I was in my feels. I was just angry, became very angry. And I found myself looking for chaos. That was the only place in my life I used to feel comfortable, was in the middle of chaos. Everything else that was normal was scary to me. And I started to become more agitated and just mean, just looking for a confrontation so I could feel that adrenaline again. I could feel that rush that I used to feel to make me feel alive, because I didn't feel alive. I didn't feel like I had a purpose. I felt like I was just kind of going through the motions. Became super depressed. I mean, just a complete jerk to my family. And I've always been a big family guy. My family is everything to me. And there was a certain period I went through that. I mean, I treated them like trash. I was trying to start fights with them just for the conflict. Anybody, hoping somebody at a red light would just cross paths with me wrong. I mean, I was just looking for violence, to feel that adrenaline, to feel that, hey, I'm still alive. I still have a purpose. And, one morning I walked in to get my son up for school, and, I told him to get up. I went back and took a shower and came back, and he wasn't up, and I just lost it. I mean, I went from A to Z. I responded almost like I would, a guy with a gun. I'm going to tell him one time, and then I'm going to make him, or I'm going to really up it, and started yelling at him, cussing at him, and I just went off. And he looked at me and he said, "Dad," and it kind of clicked, like, "Dude, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And then, I went downstairs, and my wife looked at me and she said, "Bryan, you can only function in chaos." And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, I need help. Like, my family doesn't deserve this. I chose that career. They didn't. They don't deserve everything that I'm putting them through. And if I don't get help, I'm on a path of destruction. I'm going to lose what matters to me the most. In the moment, I didn't realize they were my purpose. They're everything to me. But I was just lost, completely lost.
Well, I know a lot of people that have gone down similar paths to you end up in drugs, alcohol, a lot of suicides, and a lot of different things have gone on, especially in the last few years. It seems like there's bigger spotlights on these things that are occurring around us. So first of all, I just commend you for, being able to share what you went through and do so eloquently. So I think it's just a natural segue. So you went through this realization, and rather than what a lot of people do is go to the bar that night and drown your sorrows away, or there's all kinds of different activities that people do that are excessive, and it's to get that chaos and those endorphin rushes and all those things that you were wanting so badly. You didn't even know you were wanting it. You knew you missed something, but you didn't know the why, the real why. And as someone that's started a couple businesses, not having lived the experiences that you have, I know I felt the stresses and the things that, there was so much going on whenever was starting the businesses that I didn't have time. I loved it. Like, that was my jam. I was in the middle of it. But, you didn't really have a break or a window from old life to new life. There was no reset. There was a
transition.
You're trying to, clutch and gas from one to the other, and it's a different racetrack. You didn't get the memo to take a right and go to a different, whatever, and all that. So, but you did come to that realization, thankfully, and it seems to me like you're feeling like you're on a better path. So, do you want to talk any more about kind of the next step? I mean, I want to come back and talk about the country club a little bit more, and maybe we can do that to get it a little lighter here, but then we can come back and talk more about,
I think but this is a good segue into that, because now I think my vision is even more clear of why I want the country club, why I want it to be successful, why I want it to be a place where guys that may be like me that were struggling can come to and feel that sense of camaraderie, or they don't feel abandoned. They can come sit in here and have a coffee and be around other dudes that just get it, and sometimes guys that struggle, we don't want to talk, right? I just want to sit beside you and drink some coffee and know that you're there and I'm here. So that, I think, going through all this even brought to light more of my vision for the country club. So I would definitely like to talk more kind of what my experience was, good and bad, and maybe how do we help shift that in our society to keep other dudes from going through some of the same things that I went through. A little more guidance as they transition out of that career, because there's not. I've had a conversation with a few of my old bosses and said, man, you guys have to put some things in place for the transition. It can't just be turn in your badge and your gun and, hey, you'll do great, thanks for your service, and then we're going to give your badge number to somebody else. It needs to be more than that. When you come into that career, you get months and months of training, and throughout your whole career, you get all this training so you can be prepared for the job. Well, there needs to be some training when you leave the job as well, because like I mentioned earlier, it definitely changes you. So, kind of back to where all that led me, I was in a dark spot in my life. I felt alone. Didn't really feel like I had a purpose anymore. Started having nightmares about what did I do? I left the career. And that's the thing. I was having nightmares not about really the incidents I were involved in or things I saw. It was like leaving. That's over. It was kind of like I don't know how to really say it, kind of like having a dream about, an ex-spouse or something that you still have feelings for, and they left. I mean, there was that just sense of abandonment that I was having those literally nightmares over. I would wake up and just terrified and then realize it was my reality. So, the next morning after, my wife made the comment about I can only function in chaos, I started doing some research because I knew I needed help and I knew I was on a path of destruction. And I got on the internet like everybody, right? Started Googling mental health help, PTSD, I need help, law enforcement. And everything I came across was mostly military based, the VA and all this. And there just wasn't a lot of resources that were readily available for first responders. So the only option really was I went to a local facility here, which I will say that was extremely hard for me, because throughout my career, I've basically referred people to that location for other mental health issues. And to me at the moment, I felt like I was different than that. It was a different kind of mental health. I was just struggling with things that I've seen, and it was an ego. It was hard for me to swallow, like, man, you have to go there. So I did, because I realized my priorities. Like, if I don't do something, I'm going to lose what I have left, which was most important to me is my family. So my wife and I went to that location. Again, it took everything I had just to walk in that door, and then I go in and I get patted down, and then that was tough for me being in my position. I was like, I'm really getting patted down like I'm going to hurt somebody. I get it, totally get it, why they do what they do. But at the moment, it was kind of just like a kick in the gut, So I go in and speak to them, and they tell me they have a program for first responders, military. It's great for kind of what I was going through, and went back and talked to basically a therapist for about an hour with my wife, told her everything I was going through, what I needed. And at the end of the conversation, she was like, well, we have a program here that I think would be great for you. And I said, great. And I said, I have two requests. I don't want to be medicated. I don't want medication to try to make this better. It's not. And I said, I want to be in-house. I need to focus on me, and I need to fix this. She said, totally understand. That's the program we have. She's like, let me just go talk to the doctor, and I'll be back, and we'll get everything started. So my wife and I are kind of getting excited, like, hey, here comes some change. Here's step one. We did it. Let's go. And she comes back about 15, 20 minutes later. She's got a clipboard in her hand, and she said, well, I spoke to the doctor, and unfortunately, you do not qualify for a program. And it was like another kick in the gut. And during the interview, again, for many years of my career, I would interview criminals, and I would pay attention to things. I would pay attention to the questions being asked. I just what I did. And during that time period, I would pick up on little cues on things that she would keep asking in a different way, like medication, drinking. So essentially, she came back, said I didn't qualify for that, and literally handed me the clipboard and said, I need you to sign here. for a release. And in the moment, I was just kind of in awe, to be honest with you. I signed it. We got up. She walked us to the front door, and I'll never forget it. She said, "Good luck." Like, no, hey, here's another avenue, nothing. Literally, good luck. And as I look back at that conversation, I realized because I didn't self-medicate, I wasn't drinking every night, I wasn't doing anything, or I didn't say that I, was suicidal. I was just dark. I was in a dark place. And she knew my story. I basically spilled my guts to her. I realized because of that, I didn't fit the program. Point being, though, I never want anyone else to feel that feeling I felt that day when she said, "Good luck." The system's broken. And I know we hear this over and over and over, but it's time we make changes, and we may not be able to do it, across the board, through the whole country, but we sure as hell can do something here locally to get attention. And, everybody says they want change, they want this, but what are you really doing? What does this really look like? What would it have looked like that day if I would have committed suicide when I left there? What changes? Anything? No, you know what's going to change? They're going to go back and say, "Thank God he signed that waiver." That's what's going to happen. But my point being, I was just, I felt like granted, I will never be the person that plays victim. I chose that career, and I wouldn't go back and do it over again. But the feelings I had that day were because of what I've seen and what I've did. I've sacrificed, right? And then I just felt completely abandoned again. I just spilled my guts to you and told you why I feel the way I feel, and you tell me good luck. It's not right.
Well, it took an outrageous amount of courage and humility. To me, I can't imagine what that must have felt like. Like you said, I think you described it pretty well, but trying to feel that, most people don't do that. Most people won't take themselves somewhere and ask for help in that manner. And so, it really speaks to me, the level of person that you are. But I'm like you. It's we've got systems and mechanisms of thinking that have been built around us that, especially over the last few years, and this so happened to you in this window, but I have a feeling it's probably happened for many other years in this particular program, where people who actually need it, who've earned the treatment, that we should take care of those people in their worst moments, that we just turn them away because they don't check a box, right? So so you could have gone and said, "Yeah, I'm passing out on alcohol every day," or I'm using drugs, or whatever it is. You could have said the things that weren't true just to get in the program, but we're wanting people to be real people and to tell the truth, and so you're just setting us up for failure. And it does hit on the fact that when you said we need to make changes, part of the reason why I'm sitting here with you today and having this conversation is, over the decades, whenever I've seen things that have happened around me and around the world, and, things get more and more confusing, and people are more and more afraid. And most importantly, I think a lot of people have lost hope that anything can or will change for the better, because the people that have been put in charge of these programs and, in these bureaucracies aren't held accountable to anything. There's no mechanism between the people who are helping to pay the bills, pay the taxes that support these programs and organizations. There's no mechanism between the two to let us hold those things accountable. And so, without getting too deep into what I'm trying to do, is the think tank concept that I think would work naturally. I think you've mentioned a couple different things that I feel like are a good overlap, and we could probably start. I like the fireside chat, or I think you called it bonfire. Have a place for guys to come in. And I have another friend that I've talked to who's a member here at the Country Club. And I'm always asking him, "What do you think? What can we do?" He's like, "I'd like to sit over in the bourbon bar and have some cameras around and just have conversations and have different, things going on. I'm like, man, that'd be really cool. And like I go into action mode and like, oh man, we'd have to have a camera there and a camera there and a camera there. And like, how are we actually going to do this with people walking in and out? I think it's an incredible idea. And the reason why I think it would be a good idea, it's not just, I would be approaching it as not just a bunch of guys that are sitting around and having the conversations they need to have, but how can we take that concept and this conversation and turn it into something that can be grown upon and utilized in other areas? And rather than going and trying to fix that bureaucracy in that place that you went, that we won't name, don't need to throw anybody under the bus, but rather than trying to fix it, let's just go around it. Let's parallel it. Let's do something different. Let's not rely on other people. Let's take and create something in and of itself. So I don't want to get too deep into that, but I feel what you're saying. And it's, first of all, it's horrendous that someone like you, and being through everything that you've been through and having humility and facing your fear to go to that place, to get turned away and be told good luck. I like it when Liam Neeson said it in one of his movies. It was really, good luck. He repeated that line back to one of the bad guys who had mouthed it to him on the phone. And I feel like this is one of those moments that it's a painful thing to hear, but because it's anchored in you, it can help us drive some change. Like, you don't want anybody to hear that like that again.
Well, I give you my word, it will change. Like, I will not just be the silent one. How many dudes like me walked away that day, felt defeated, and never said anything to anybody, right? Because they don't want people to know. And at the moment, I probably wouldn't have either. But going through and coming out of this, like, I think it's important. I think it's, and again, it's not me against that facility. It's like, how do we keep this from happening to other dudes? How do we have, like, does the country club have a place when you're feeling like that? Can you come here and then we have resources we can direct you to so you don't hear that good luck? I just think it's too hard. It's too hard to get help. We got to change that. Like, we owe it to these people that have served. And I'm speaking outside of myself. I know a lot of great men and women that have served that will live with things forever that people can't really wrap their heads around, and they shouldn't. And again, I chose this career. It's not like I was drafted back in Vietnam. I mean, I chose this and I wouldn't change it for anything, but we still should have those resources available when people need them. And not even just military first responders. This is people across the board. Look, at the end of the day, PTSD is PTSD. If you're abused as a kid, like, you're going to struggle with things. Like, you deserve help. You do. And then they make it too hard. So my goal is, through the country club, through my contacts in the community, like, how do we build a place? How do we get resources out there to people? Like, do our politicians, like, do they really know that this kind of stuff happens? I don't know. Like, locally, I don't know. If I spoke to one of the mayor candidates, like, do you know this happened to me? Probably not. Like, so could we do better about pushing information out? I think so. Because again, I think a lot of guys stay silent. And prior to me getting help, I wouldn't have told anybody my story. I was ashamed. I thought I was weak, But now I know that I believe that God put me through that for a reason. I really do. I believe that, he sent me through the program like that. That was a miracle on its own. And I'd like to speak briefly about how that happened and the benefits of that program. But I believe that I went through that for a reason, and I'm not going to just let it go.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to, it's a natural segue to talk about that program. If you want to do that now, let's go ahead and flesh that out. And if we have time, we can get into some of the other stuff I know we wanted to talk about. But this is, to me, providing value, hopefully, for a lot of people, and not just them seeing what you went through and that there are other options out there, but just in the conversation that we've had since you've come back from that program, I can tell you're a different person. But I also know that program is a program, and it's not everybody can get into it, and it's challenging. And so, part of this thing for me is like, how can we turn that process and that system into something that is actionable, that we can maybe not do it as good as they did it,
Right.
whatever, but it's a place, a starting place to get people to that next step. So if you want to maybe talk about that next step that you took, I think this is the right time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a good friend of mine. He's actually one of my instructors. He was in the military, was over in the sandbox, did a lot of stuff that he brought home. Ended up being a paramedic here, so still, dealing with stuff, seeing stuff every day. And, again, I didn't know that he was struggling, right? It's not really our thing to tell people we struggle, especially, the type A's. We don't want people to know, yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. And, I remember him telling me one time that he was dark and he went through this program and it really changed his life. And, when you hear that stuff, back then I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. Yeah, I'm sure it did. You can't, I'm so messed up, nobody can fix me. And that's the way that a lot of guys think. I'm messed up. You can't fix this. That just becomes, I think, a natural response for a lot of people that struggle is I'm too messed up, nothing can fix me. And I remember he and I had a conversation one day and he was just telling me how it literally saved his life. And it was a program that he really wanted to push and give the opportunity to other military or first responders. So when I left that location here, I thought about that conversation as my wife and I drove away. And so I just reached out to him. I said, hey, bro, I said, I'm kind of struggling. And he was like, I knew you were. And he was like, I was waiting for your phone call. It was kind of like it was meant to happen. And I said, tell me a little bit more about this program. And the program, it's called Warrior Path. Man, I can't say enough good things about it. So I said, tell me a little bit about this, man. He was like, man, you go away to a location, and you basically spend 7 days with 7 or 8 other dudes that struggle with you. And he said, you have guides there. They're not therapists. This is all training based. So that's how we respond. So it's training. You don't have therapists, you have guides. And the cool thing is, all the guides have been Warrior Path alumni. They were there. They've been in my shoes. They know what it's like. So to me, that speaks volumes. You can go speak to somebody, and therapists are great. I'm not saying anything bad. They're meant. We need them. But when I try to explain my feeling on some of these things, like you just don't get it unless you get it. It's different. You can't read about some of the experiences in a book and understand the same. It's not the same. So when he told me that, it immediately gave the program credentials to me. I was like, okay, well, tell me more. So he gave me the contact information. I submitted an application. The next day I got a phone call from a guide basically doing an onboarding, asked me questions, about who I am, what I'm experiencing, and if I do qualify for the program. So again, had to dump it all to somebody I didn't know on the phone. I don't think they were in North Carolina. So trying to be vulnerable with somebody you've never met over the phone was a little different, but I did it because I knew I knew what path I was on. And at that point I was just like, God, anything, like I'll do it. I want to be happy. I just want to feel happy again. And I didn't know what that feeling felt like. So I was willing to do anything to get there. So during the conversation, I poured out of where I've been and how I feel. And the guy was like, well, you definitely qualify for our program. We want to get you in. Typically it's about, 3 to 4 month wait on this program because it's not super large. We have only a few locations around the country, and we only take 7 to 8 students at a time because it's very focused. It's not a big group therapy. It's very focused on those people. And but if we have a cancellation, are you willing to just leave? And I said, absolutely, don't care. Again, I'm a big believer in God. 2 days later, my phone rings and said, hey, we've got a class coming up in 2 weeks. Some dude just bailed. He can't make it. Do you want it? I said, I'll be there. So I booked my plane ticket that day. Then after I did, I got a little nervous. Like, oh, man, what's coming now? I'm flying to Arkansas, going to a place that I have no idea what's going on. Don't know these people. What's this going to look like? So it gives you some information online, a little bit about the programs, but obviously it's kind of close to the heart. They don't put everything out there. So being a cop for 20 years, I'm like, I don't know what I trust. I don't know how this looks. So anyway, I land at the airport. I get there, and unfortunately, they were stuck in an accident, and they were about an hour late. So now my brain starts thinking, man, what did I do? I'm going to get back on a plane. I'm going home. I made a mistake. But then one of the dudes reaches out to me. He's like, hey, we're getting ready to pull up. So we get there, and the location I'm told we're going, we actually go to a different location first. So as we start heading there, I'm in the back seat of this van. There's a passenger and a driver that I've never met in my life. I'm already on edge. I'm not in a great place. And I'm like, where are we going? I'm like, well, we're going to this place over here, which was a completely different state than now looking. It was right on the line, right? So at that point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to choke this guy with the seatbelt. I'm going to start kicking this guy. Like, I'm literally going to that bad place in my head. Like, no, this is not comfortable. Like, I went into, violence, right? That was my response. And it's funny that I tell these guys, we all started laughing after I told them that I thought about choking them with a seatbelt and what I was going to do. But it ended up being just kind of a onboarding place. And then we went to the ranch that we spent 7 days at. During this 7 days, again, it was 7 other guys. Myself and one other guy were the only 2 prior law enforcement. Everybody else was military. I was a little nervous about that, not being in the military. Like, how is this going to work? Are we going to click? Is it the same? Is it different? So obviously, when I got there, I'm a very kind of standoffish guy. If I don't trust people or don't know, so I was just silent. I just kind of sit there and had my guard up. I walk in, I see all these dudes, and I'm like, oh man, what did I do? This is uncomfortable. I got to spend 7 days, away from my family. So the first thing we get there, like, okay, well, we need you to turn your phones off. And then I start kind of going to that, and I don't have, the only thing in my life that's comfortable still is my wife and my kids. Like, so it was very uncomfortable. But again, I knew that I had to do something. So I told myself, I'm going to give it 100%. I'm going to dive into this with everything I got and hope for the best. So we get on the bus and we go to this location. And man, I from the moment I arrived there and the feeling of anxiety to the end of the first day was unbelievable. I don't want to get in a lot of the details of the program other than kind of the direction and how much it helped me, because I definitely want to promote it. I want to give people information about the program because it literally, it changed my life forever. But the first hour in class, everybody's kind of there, with their arms crossed, with their guards up, like, everybody in there is an alpha. By the end of the day, there's 7 grown men in there literally crying to each other because we would talk about what we struggle with, and realizing, a guy that was in the sandbox that experienced trauma was the same as my trauma, as the experiences that I had here, on our soil. Trauma's trauma. And we all respond differently, but at the end of the day, it affects us somewhat the same, So over these 7 days, we were given training on, again, it's not what's wrong with me, it's what's happened to me, and really understanding that and diving into that. That was a super big eye opener for me. And then just giving us training, like, how do I respond to these certain situations and why do I respond that way? And once you really start looking at, okay, well, I look back at the moment that I yelled at my kid because he didn't do what I said. Well, my brain's in that work mode. If I don't get you to comply, I could die, right? In my position, especially, we were dealing with some violent people. And I knew that if I lost control, things could go sideways. So in my brain, it goes to, this is normal response. You're not getting what you want, so you up it. And to me, that was just normal. That was, my brain was trained to do that. So that's where that kind of came to light, is like, okay, like I'm responding to the training I've had over years. And, you know, they speak about it in law enforcement and militaries that you always resort to your training like in a stressful situation. And I think that's across the board things we don't like, you know, not just my gun coming out when it needed to, but also in those situations like with my son, my brain just goes to, here's the response, got to up it. This isn't enough. With aggression, there's a lot of aggression, you know, in that world. So really starting to see that and understand, like, okay, like it's not what's wrong with me. Like this is the way I've been trained to respond. And then being able to see that from 30,000 feet. And again, it was like the dimmer switch is like, okay, like I don't have to respond that way. I can retrain my brain. I can understand. Like if I can understand something, like if we understand something, I think it can change a response, right? Then not understanding something and just responding based off emotion. And that's really what Warrior Path did for me. And then, you know, we really unpack everything, like, you know, everything from my childhood, things I struggled with, abandonment, and how I didn't realize at the time I associated that with my old job and these dudes not calling me. So it kind of all just snowballed. And then once I started unpacking that and hearing stories from other guys that were different but similar, it was like, man, like I'm not messed up. Like this is quote normal for people that have seen the things that we've seen and lived the lives that we've lived. And you know, I was fortunate enough to get some amazing training, but some amazing relationships. You know, they just taught us different principles to use. Never in my life did I thought I would meditate. Never me. No. Mm-mm. But now, man, it's part of my daily routine, like meditating, and then my gratitude. You know, it's like you referred to earlier, the psychologist that spent all those years in the camp, right? And understanding that you can have everything taken from you, but nobody can control your thoughts or your response to things. That's something nobody can ever take from you. And that was actually part of our program, is kind of diving into his experience and how he would make those choices in that camp every day to look at the positive and to serve others, to give them, you know, last cigarette or the last piece of food, and understand like what that did for him. And it was all a choice. You know, he could sit around and be like everybody else. It's sad and think they're going to die, or he can choose not to do that. And I think that's one of the biggest things in Path that taught me, is it is a choice. Not always easy to control it, but at the end of the day, it's attitude and effort. Nobody can control those for me. My attitude to everything and how I respond to everything, like that's on me.
Well, I can imagine, like, you can envision something happening to you today. You might leave this podcast room and something might happen to you, and you can imagine, like, how would I have handled that before? You know, what would that guy have done? And I think, you know, you can have gratitude about the fact that you're now able to look at things so much differently. And, you know, I'm inspired by these kinds of stories because, you know, one of the things I've always thought is I've always thought about ways that I can improve myself, and how, you know, from schools and, you know, our hospital systems and all these different things that are going on around us. And, you know, people are all going in their own direction and they're trying to make their way in life. And yet we're all struggling and dealing with things, you know, and if we had the basic training in the important things, you know, and you find it a lot, I think, in more spiritual countries where, you know, it's a lot of it starts with meditation and prayer, and, you know, without getting into the religious aspect of anything, because it's, you know, kind of not my purpose in this, but the process of resetting and training yourself on how to look at things, I think, cannot be understated. And I feel like, you know, I'm very passionate about our education systems and how, you know, what are we training our kids to do and not do. And, you know, I feel like from the earliest of ages, take what you've learned and then slide that backwards, and how that applies to our kids and how they can, I mean, your kids are learning from you because they saw dad as this angry guy that wanted to rip their ears off, you know, to this guy now who probably isn't perfect, still messes up from time to time, but it's a different person. I mean, personally, looking back from the first time you and I sat down over in a different room in a different space, you're a different human right now than you were right then, and I want to commend you for that. You were very agitated. You were sincere. You were kind. We've had a pretty good, fast friendship, but you were very distracted. I could tell you weren't comfortable being there. You wanted to be somewhere else. You were being pulled in 100 different directions, which you were starting a business, so that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, these little windows of time when you're sitting here and you're having conversation, you're able, hopefully, through these things, help other people, but learn even more about yourself. I mean, and how can we help other people in your exact same kind of situation, not exact same facts, but for me, taking this experience and then what can we learn from it and how can we apply it to other areas is 100% essential to improving humanity. I mean, we're so divided and fearful of everything that's going on around us, and our kids are afraid because we're afraid, and it's like, where does the insanity end? So for me, these conversations are essential because you take something that you're completely engulfed in your former career, moving into a new career. You don't really think about it in those times of how that is affecting the people around you, your wife and your children, until you do. Sometimes it slaps you in the head and says, whoa, or sometimes you just get a divorce filed on you or something weird may who knows what the thing that finally wakes a person up. But it's like, why can't we train and be prepared for these types of things and be more proactive in how we think about it? Like, you grew up in a career where you thought talking about it made you weak, and you thought probably when you didn't think about retiring for most of your career, but then when you finally did, you're like, man, this is gonna be good. I can do these other things. You had no idea what's getting ready to hit you in the head, and so it's like, how can we express that to other law enforcement officers? And I feel like even our current local and regional, national agencies, I'm sure, are not doing a great job of it. So it's like, we need to create the path for all people to be able to, find that information and be helped.
Well, it needs, there is a little bit of, I guess, scared to be too honest in that career, because, if you're completely honest sometimes, like, what does that look like? Am I going to get taken off? Am I going to put on, light duty? They're going to take my gun. They're going to do this if I admit that I'm struggling with something. So that's another hurdle on its own, and maybe some of those instances like that needs to happen to guys depending on where they're at, but not to everybody. Honestly, if you do that, it could almost make things spiral worse for guys, because then they feel like, okay, there is no hope for me. But
this is all I've got, and you're going to take that away from me.
That's it, man. Right. I mean, that's everything, and that's kind of where I was at when I left. But just real quick to circle back around, I think it's important point just to touch on is, all the experiences I went through in my career, even maybe not the same or directly, but my wife and my family have paid the price for those as well. I was speaking to somebody the other day at one of my last encounters before I retired last summer. I was involved in a shooting, and my wife and my younger son were at travel baseball. Well, it just so happens our FOP attorney's kid played on that same team. So during the game, the attorney gets a phone call that I was just involved in a shooting. And my wife has to hear that from her, knowing she can't talk to me. Only thing she knows is I'm okay. So I'm like, at the time it was like, man, I'm good. Don't, But now I flipped the script. Like, if that were me and somebody told me my wife was just involved in a shooting, but I can't talk to her, I would have lost my mind. I couldn't imagine the anxiety that comes with that, or, her seeing on Evansville Watch that we're on a barricade, a guy, whatever it may be. But at the time, it was just about, we're good. Don't worry. We're good. We got this. But if I put myself in her shoes, I'm like, oh, my God, no way. Like, I would have been the creepy husband driving past the barricade like, babe, you good? There's no way I could have dealt with that. So I think that, that's a whole other piece that needs to be available for spouses, because they do deal with the same thing, maybe not directly, but indirectly. And then, now that, prior to Path, my wife was really dealing with it. I mean, she's the one that was getting the blunt of all the stuff that, the monster was letting come up.
me and Bryan will be having additional conversations about the path that he's taking and is still on, and that's going to be going forever forward. In the show notes of wherever you find this video, we will put links to the Warrior Path. Is that what you said? So whatever contact information and URLs that are social media platforms, wherever we can link that up, it will be in the show notes. So check that out. Do you want to talk a little bit more about? And I don't know if there's something in the Country Club. I mean, we really haven't told people what the Country Club is. It's besides sounding cool. For anyone listening to this, if you live in the Evansville tri-state area, what is it? And what is it now? What are you aiming for in the future? Like, what's the vision for it? And what type of people you think should want to come here, and why would they want to come here? Because some of the things I've heard are, and is it for law enforcement only, or is it, or what people don't really know. It's a little mysterious, which is fun. You want a little mystery, and you want the thing to be inclusive and for the people that are the right fit for it.
So really for me, obviously this is a multifaceted facility that offers a lot of different things for the public, our members, people to enjoy, to better themselves. But overall, my vision, my feeling for this facility, it's an experience and it's a feeling. When I began with this idea, part of that was, over the last 20 years of my career, like, I've really seen this country tank, like, in certain areas. Like, how do we go from here to here? And then, so it's such a drastic difference. And then how do we get here? And then how do we fix it? In my opinion, it's not everybody's, but part of that is we forgot our values, our morals, the simple things like, sir, ma'am, thank you, please, holding the door, just simple things, and gratitude. And that was kind of one of my visions for this place. Is I wanted to create a place, I refer to it as the old America, where we still value each other and we can agree to disagree. It's okay for Chad and I to have a cup of coffee and talk about, well, this is my view. Well, I don't agree, but that's okay. I think we've gotten away from that in our country, and then it just turns to division. And you know what? I'm going to unfriend you on Facebook because you believe in this. Well, that's your right, bro. Like, that's what this country's about. And I think, people still want that, but there's not really a place that they can go and feel those same values and those same, I guess, that comfort, being in a facility where, we offer a lot of training here by professional instructors that have lived that life. I don't want to get into everything we do, but not only that, but, we offer, like I said, the experience is the biggest part for me. Like, when you come in, I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel like, when you go into my restaurant, if you want to pray for your food, you can pray for your food. It's okay. You're not going to get judged or looked at a certain way. Or if you don't, that's fine. If you want to, go into a lounge, have a nice bourbon with your buddy and talk about life, like, in a comfortable environment, this is the place. Or if you want to, you never shot a gun before and you want to learn how to shoot a gun the right way and by professionals and feel comfortable, instructors with no egos, this is the place. If you want to bring your daughter and teach her how to defend herself when she goes off to college, this is the place. If you want to get yourself in better physical condition, I mean, we have a gym, trainers, that will help you get there. So again, this place is about an experience. Like, how can I come to the Country Club today and be better than I was when I got there? Like, when I leave, if that makes sense. Like, every day, like, we should try to be a little better than we were yesterday. And that's the goal of my facility. Like, even if it's, you want to come in and you and I have a cup of coffee and talk about, hey, you and your wife struggled with this last night. Like, hey, bro, I get it. Like, let's be real, be raw. and be vulnerable. I don't think that a lot of people do that anymore, and I think that's real relationships.
The reason why I think you and I synced up in the first place is once I got on the path I'm on now, and I saw what you were trying to create here, and we've got a lot of mutual friends, and I was hearing the buzz of everything that was going on. It seemed like a perfect place for people to unite that maybe wouldn't have united before, and might find each other. That if you go to a restaurant or a bar or anywhere else, I mean, you don't know the morals, values, or whatever of those people, and that's fine. That's fun. I enjoy going to those places. But, you know, whenever you're feeling anxious or afraid or looking for just somebody that might be able to understand where you're coming from, it is nice to go to a place where, you know, you feel like you can say whatever you want to say and find other people that are willing to listen. You know, this isn't political, really.
Right.
It's about, you know, for me, I have great conversations and friends on both sides of the aisle. Now, I lean definitely a certain way, and I think anybody that has heard anything that I've ever said, it's pretty easy to understand that. But, you know, for me, I know for society to start to heal and to get better, we do need to figure out a way to have conversations with people again. And even the people that, you know, as an election gets closer, we're going to be much more on edge and
Of course.
Wanting to push what we feel like the country needs. At the end of the day after the election, we still need to find a way to recover much faster than we have been able to do that over the past several election cycles. So, you know, for me, a lot of the conversations that I have spent time in the country club bar, sipping on a good drink with some friends, and like it seems like everyone's shields go down a little bit whenever I'm in there, so I feel really comfortable, and I think that experience is what you're talking about. So, like you and I here, I feel like this is a very comfortable experience, but it'd be decent if we could go have a beer and talk about it or whatever. So, you know, like maybe that's after this.
Absolutely.
But, you know, so for me, what I wanted to express was, you know, this place, if someone listening to this isn't in our area, it really is about, you know, finding spaces where you can go and unite with people who know that things aren't quite the way they should be. We need to all acknowledge that. Like, if you can't acknowledge that we're going in a bad direction at this point, this is, first of all, you're not listening to this podcast probably, but, you know, secondly, it's like the only way that we can get better is if we acknowledge the things that are going on around us and we're real about it. And do we, you know, what happens if we don't do anything? We don't change the way we've thought about things in the past and the way we've reacted to things. You know, this goes right back into your experience. And how are we going to take everything that's happened, and are we going to get up tomorrow and be frustrated and go yell at somebody on Facebook? And is that really going to help anything? Or can we get our asses off the couch, go out and start taking action on some things? And I feel like this is the perfect type of place to do that. You know, we need to say, well, if we do nothing, we just assume, you know, from 2020 to 2024, or whatever that window of time looked like for us, if we keep in that trajectory, what is it going to look like at that point? Well, the space between stimulus and response is we've had the stimulus, and now everybody seems like they're just kind of like afraid to even talk about it. We've been canceled. We've been, you know, having a conversation like this is something that brought me through the pandemic. Like, I started listening to podcasts of different guys and people that I didn't before. I didn't really get in, but those were the people that were standing up and saying the things that weren't popular. And many of them were trying to got canceled or got their YouTube rights taken off because they said about a wrong word or something that the thought police didn't come up with. And to me, these conversations and bringing other people like you and me together into bigger groups and helping to solve problems that are going on all around us are the only way that we're going to get out of this. You know, for me, anyone that's listening to this particular episode and is interested in the topic, and not just that, you know, one of the things that bothers me about all the great conversations that are going on out there, you know, whether it's Rogan or Sean Ryan or Jordan Peterson or Russell Brand, I mean, these are all guys that I listen to. You can listen to whoever. What always bothers me is where do those conversations go? It's not, we hear things and are like, man, that's really interesting. And then
It dies.
It dies into the night and you're like, I need that next step. So for me, the vision of this podcast for me and sitting down with you is taking something and all these conversations that are going on and turning it into something actionable that someone that doesn't have time to listen to a 3-hour podcast or 3 different podcasts in a day to get one tinkle of information that might help them in their day, they need a place to go where they can find some truth. They can find people that have raised red flags about the problems that they've seen, and they can offer a path that the people that were the ones raising the red flags can be basically on your side and in your think tank. So you can ask them questions and say, well, you got the last 3 years or 4 years right, or you went through this dark experience and you're coming out the lights on the end of the tunnel. I just need to know how to do that. I don't have time to go do my own Googling, as you said in the beginning, and do my own research. I mean, it should be easier. And so to circle back around to that, I just wanted to say, like, this conversation is going to evolve. To me, I hope our next conversation is, here's where some rubber's hitting the road, and here's how we're going to start creating a better path for people that you're obviously passionate about in this particular realm is PTSD. So hopefully you and I think we need to have some other conversations, probably not on the podcast, and just get some organization together. But I really do want to turn it into something actionable.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's my goal.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Country Club, because there's something that I've recently started on, and you've got a new branch kind of that's not directly. I mean, I think you share an office with Optimize You, which is another piece, and I know a lot of people in Evansville here are interested in this, and this isn't, it's telemedicine and whatever, but so there's a lot of different therapies and things that are going on that are helping people, improve their bodies. And as I've aged, I've had some things that I've needed to work on, and you put me on to speaking to a guy, and I did that. So I'm actually going to interview Derek, I think, here in the next few days. And what's the vision beyond what is here at the Country Clubs? Like, if someone was considering, like, man, that sounds really interesting, what are the other things that you feel like we could potentially do? Or if somebody else wanted to anchor a business here, like, what other things could we add that makes this kind of an all-inclusive deal? I know Derek has some ideas, but I mean, do you have another vision for anything? I know you don't want to start another business, but I mean, kind of what other
resources, though. I want to provide resources.
Yeah. So,
Optimize You, that's not part of Lawman. It's not part of the Country Club. They are a tenant on our facility, on our property, but it fits, right? I mean, we're all about how do we self-improve, and Optimize You and Derek and his team, they have a lot of knowledge in different peptides, different therapies, stuff like that. Injuries, got a lot of knowledge in injuries, which really caught my attention from my life of being silly and stupid in sports and such things. But just the different therapies that they have that they can offer, I felt like was a good fit for one of our tenants. So, as I continue to grow this facility out, like, I also want to put the right people in the right places, even as far as tenants, to help, see the vision of what the Country Club is, right? In that, I also have other tenants that are physical therapists. I'm looking to potentially put a chiropractor in there as well. Obviously they're separate entities, but bringing those pieces in so our members and our people that come to visit us have all these pieces in one place. It just makes sense. Even maybe eventually doing kind of a old school barber shop, white coat, hot shaves, nice hot bourbon, a good bourbon while you're drinking or you're getting a hot shave. Just kind of that old feel of kind of this feels good. I feel comfortable here. So lots of dreams and ideas for this facility, but one piece at a time.
Yeah, well, part of that was a little bit of a plug for you, because I mean, I know there still is some space here, and for my own selfish pleasure, it's like I would love to have more in Evansville that I could just so convenient. Like, you could come have a coffee or have a bourbon, and prior to that, you can go do all these other things that you don't have to bounce around all over town to do the things that
spend the day
make
here.
you feel better.
Right.
So how can we make it more inclusive? Because that would be better for me.
Right.
But yeah, so first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your story again, and I do consider you a friend, and I hope this conversation leads to many more conversations, both with camera and not. But other than that, I just look forward to hopefully building that next step and helping you help other people who struggled, because I know you're really passionate about this, and I'm passionate about not doing the same old things that we've always done and getting trapped in, well, this is the only option that I have. It's like there's so many different things that we're facing right now that we need clearer paths. We need better paths. And hopefully this particular one that you and I will work on together is gonna help a bunch of people. So.
I think so. And, the last thing I want to say is I really want to drive home, if anybody takes anything out of this podcast, like if you're struggling, there is help out there. And remember, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. I think that's a very important piece that really stuck with me, that made me realize, like, I didn't do this to myself, and that there is hope out there. And, my goal is to help provide and facilitate at least the resources and a direction, so nobody ever has to have the feeling that my wife and I did the day when we left the other facility. It's just not a great place to be. And, I feel like that's part of my purpose here, and definitely a goal of mine to get more information out and to at least, be a place where, if a guy's struggling, he knows he has somewhere to go. Like, a lot of my guys that work here, first responders, military dudes, like, we get it. Like, you're struggling, man, come in and tell us. We'll have a cup of coffee. Like, that's what matters. It doesn't matter about what else is going on here. We'll stop it for the day. Like, let's just talk, man. That's
fantastic. So I think I do want to cover that a little bit more. So, like, we're going to put contact information in the show notes to the facility you went to. And we didn't talk about how many people they have to turn away, or if someone reaches out to them, and, how do we get that good luck gone as quickly as we can? Like, we've got immediate triage that we've got some bleeding here. We need to stop it. Right. And if someone listens to this and gets in the show notes and goes to the thing, I mean, are we sure that they're going to, somebody called you back right away. So that it sounds like they've got a really good system there. My concern would be, well, it didn't work out. They couldn't make the date. You just created another bridge where if you live in this area, come to the Lawman Country Club and let's
hang out, man.
So I mean, I feel like that needs to be. If I walk in the door, what does that look like? I mean, I feel like we need to kind of create that path where it's a little more laid out. Like, not here, we're not solving it, but you know what I mean. Like, I'm physically trying to put myself in what you went through to that facility, and the fact that you had to drive away from there with nowhere to go is petrifying to me. So let's talk about that, because I want people, if one person hears this and they come walking through that door, what do they need to do?
Right.
What's going to get that conversation started? Or maybe we put if there's another resource or something in the show notes that says, if this doesn't work, here's a couple other options. So some options. So let's do that. We'll take care of that in the show notes.
Good.
So, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the space, and I look forward to the next one.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, brother.